at you from the inside of Clark, the mobile office, if you will. A lot to update you on, as this episode will mostly be about travel. So we're not doing any legislative updates today because we have a lot to cover from the last 2 days. So we started, today's Sunday, we started on Friday, and we left Arlington around 1 p.m. That was Dallas, Texas area. I had several hours of work to do, which I got to accomplish from the KOA there in Arlington. And then the goal was to drive from Arlington, Texas to Wichita Falls, Texas, which we did, which was just about 2 hours of travel and about 126 miles. We traversed up Route 281, basically 81 in a northern direction, northwesternly direction. And wow, we saw many wind farms, lots of windmills along the way. It was kind of like a Don Quixote experience with all those windmills. And here's some brief coverage of those windmills. We then made one brief stop on the way, as Oscar and I both had to take a bio break. So we stopped at a picnic area on the way, and I took a pretty cool picture of Clark as we were up on a hill, and Clark was down below as I took Oscar for a little run. So take a quick pick at or a quick look at this very cool picture of Clark from the hill. All right, then we got back in and we started heading on to Wichita Falls, Texas, where we needed to fuel up. So we stopped at Love's truck stop and took on 40.82 gallons of diesel fuel, which we paid $5.19 per gallon. That's the undiscounted cost before our TSD discounts. That cost us $212.03. I also needed to fill our DEF tanks, our DEF, or diesel exhaust fuel tanks, which you can see here. And by the way, it was a bit cold in Wichita Falls, Texas. It was in the 40s, which I was dressed for, but still pretty cold. Take a look at this video as we fill our DEF tanks. All right, the other thing that we've had to do at this fuel stop is we've had to fill DEF. So I've talked about this before. There's a reason for DEF, this requirement after 2010. Diesel trucks to reduce carbon emissions. And right now, I'm using this, buying it at the pump, which is sometimes more of a challenge for a couple of reasons. I use my box DEF, which I carry on board. And this is going to probably take 2, maybe 2.5 inch boxes. I'll probably just fill it with stuff. It's really cold out here. So, anyway, we'll check in with you. After that brief stop, we started on to Amarillo, Texas, where we would have another 223 miles of travel, about another 3.5 hours of drive time. Now, along the way, we made another pit stop to let Oscar out as he was nudging my arm with a pretty serious look of urgency. So he's very good at telling us what he wants, whether he's thirsty or hungry or needs to use the doggy facility. So we stopped, and it's pretty interesting. We realized we're not in New Jersey anymore as we saw this sign. Take a look at this sign. Yikes. Oscar, he did not realize that he could be taking his life into his paws as he squatted to do his business. So needless to say, we were very careful about where we stepped, and we were indeed looking out for rattlesnakes. So we continued on after that stop, and we arrived into Amarillo around 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, and pulled on up to the KOA Journey Amarillo, and here's a video of our arrival.
Turn left.
Now, I know that there's KOA holidays and KOA journeys. I haven't figured out what's what. Journey's probably a place you stop on the way on your journey, because I don't think anybody's holidaying at the airport. So, just a guess, this is a KOA journey as we pull in here in Amarillo, Texas.
Arriving at Amarillo KOA Journey on the left.
All right, and we're going to park and register here.
Please drive to highlighted route. In 1/4 mile, turn left on I-40 Business Loop.
There you go, look at that. It's very festive. I can hear the mariachi band. When we arrived, it was cold and there was a freeze warning that was posted at the campground. Now remember, you've got big tanks of liquid on board, and you take water in from the city hookups at these campgrounds. So you really need to be vigilant on temperatures to avoid freezing those tanks and the pipes that lead from them and in them. So as a result, I took extra precaution, and I turned on my tank heaters, which are basically heating pads that are on the bottom of the black and gray tanks. And I put a portable heater in the wet bay. Since we're going to be pulling out early the next morning for a long day of travel, I basically did not hook into the city water or the sewage. I only hooked up to the electrical. So it was kind of like boondocking with electricity. So I also did not open the slides or put down the leveling jacks. I wanted to be able to make a quick departure the following morning because I knew we had a big travel day. How big, I did not realize. We'll tell you that in a minute. But it went down to 29 degrees overnight. So a friend who was actually our salesman at Dylan's RV in Sewell, New Jersey, and now Campers Inn, he taught me some tricks, and this is one of his tips of keeping these tanks warm. So Tom Jinks from Campers Inn, seriously, he's the best. He sold Clark to us, and he helped us tremendously with many best practices and tips. As he's got a lot more experience than me. He was already 10 years into this RVing thing before I started. So it gave me lots of confidence. So a big shout out to my good friend Tom Jinks from Campers Inn in Toms River, New Jersey. So, and this is one of his tricks in hooking up the wet bay to keep things warm. So take a look at this video. It's a little cold out here. Tonight's going to go down to 24. So I got my tank heaters on, and I just put this portable heater in, plugged it into the pole over here, ran an extension cord. I'm just running this little portable heater, electric heater in here to keep things warm, because the wet bay is the coldest area right now. That kept our wet bay and our other tanks at a pretty good temperature. I continue to monitor them. Our freshwater tank is actually inside the coach underneath our king-size bed. And when I give you an internal tour of Clark, we'll show you that. So the tank stays relatively warm when we're using the coach and while we're running because of the heat inside that stays inside and generates. So here's a quick pic of those tank readings so you can see how I monitor those tanks. And as you can see, the wet bay was nice and warm with that heater on. And on the way back, I'll be running a couple more heaters underneath because of the gray and black compartments. We're going to be staying in some cold locations on our way back. We're heading back to the northeast, when we head back a week and a half. And the big danger is on freezing is when the coach is sitting for a long time when you're in storage, and that's when you need to winterize it. But as long as you're using it and you're keeping things warm and doing these best practices, you're going to be okay. So I will show you the process for putting Clark away when we winterize them, but we'll be on the road and we'll keep things moving along, and you'll see the kind of things that I do to keep the tanks from freezing and the pipes, especially as we head back in a week or so back towards the northeast. So let's talk a little bit about the KOA in Amarillo. When we literally camped next to an airport runway, as you can see on this map. We were not far from a very active rail line and a major highway. So it was basically planes, trains, and automobiles, as you can see as the train goes by in this video. Now, we got up very early Saturday morning after a good night's sleep and got to catch this beautiful sunrise from the camp at Amarillo. Check out some of this footage. Here we are at the Amarillo RV Park. We are literally right next to the runway of an airport. The sun's coming up out there. Beautiful view for our sunset. Facing out east. There's a little bit of a view of KOA journey here. So there's a highway over there. There's a train that comes through over there. You can hear it in the distance, but it will be coming through here in just a minute. And we got to hear planes, trains, and automobiles. There's the airport right out there. We're next to the runway, as the map shows. But we got what we needed. There's Clark back there, next to that fifth wheel. We plugged in electric. We did not plug in sewage or water because of the cold temperatures. Going down into the 20s, I wanted to minimize the risk of freezing, and I monitored my tanks. I have alerts set up, and we did pretty well. So here we go from the KOA journey, Amarillo, Texas. And a beautiful sunrise. We then set out on our journey about 7:30 a.m. or so after catching that amazing sunrise. And when we then traveled about 4.5 hours of drive time, 294 miles to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and there we took on another 64.34 gallons of fuel and paid $5.24 per gallon of diesel, costing us $333.84 to fuel up pre-discount. You can see as we're moving on into New Mexico, and after that fuel stop, we needed to make an unscheduled stop at the Camping World in Albuquerque. And I actually broke a flexible hose adapter, which I use for my water filters and hooking up the city water. So I needed to replace it, and I did not have an extra. So I also purchased a Freeze Band 2000 hose, which I'll show you when I use that on the way back. And it's used for cold temperatures, and that hose actually has a built-in heating element and will stop the city water line from the source of that from freezing. So with a full tank of fuel and a full tank of DEF and our camping supplies, we were ready to get back on the road. And then we left the fuel stop. We traveled on to Flagstaff, Arizona, where our plan was to stop for the evening. The drive there was pretty amazing. We traveled another 318 miles, about 5 hours of travel time in that leg, and we just saw some amazing sights. Check out some of this footage as we drove on into Arizona. Welcome to Arizona. Also, we drove right by the exit for Winslow, Arizona. We did not stop this time, but last May when we were driving back from the West Coast, we did stop with Clark, and we took some very cool footage of Winslow, Arizona. So it's the famous corner of Winslow, Arizona, as depicted in the Eagles classic, Take It Easy. So check out some of this footage from last May. There we are. We're coming up to the corner of Winslow, Arizona, where the famous Eagles song, Take It Easy, was written. Right on Route 66. Now, when we got into Flagstaff, it was time to stop for provisions at the local Walmart before moving on to our camp at a KOA in Flagstaff. Well, the parking lot was tiny and very, very tight. So I found a spot to park while Christy went in to shop, and I took Oscar for a little walk. I then went on a recognizance mission on foot to search for my path out of the parking lot, and saw that it would be very tight. Maneuvering would be a challenge, but certainly doable, and it was. So on our way out of that parking lot, we actually saw another Renegade Valencia parked across the highway in a large open lot. And we saw the people outside of their coach. We gave them a big wave and a couple blasts of the air horn. Well, these folks actually are members of Renegade Facebook group, which we are members of. Christy monitors that regularly, and they said hello to the fellow Valencia owners that honked at us in Flagstaff, Arizona. And Christy exchanged with them that it was us, and we compared travel notes and where we were both from, where they were traveling from. They're actually from Colorado. They're traveling with their 10-year-old daughter and homeschooling her for a bit while they traverse the country. Very common thing, by the way, in the RV community. We met another couple when we pulled in here at Lake Mead, and they have 2 preteen kids that they're homeschooling. They sold their house in Nashville at the top of the market and decided to live in their RV and travel the country for a year. They then are going to buy another house after the market settles down a bit. So great idea. They wanted to sell at the top of the market, live in their RV for a year, see the country, and see how the market settles down before they go back in and buy another house somewhere in America. So back to our travels. We secured our provisions at the Walmart and then headed on into the KOA in Flagstaff, as that was on our itinerary. The sun was setting. We wanted to get into camp. So Christy got out as she normally does and went in to check in and find our spot. Well, as she got back in the coach, I saw that she had no paperwork or map. So she looked at me and said, we have no reservations here. Oops, big problem. So I looked at my itinerary, and lo and behold, I saw the details, but there was absolutely no confirmation code, which simply means I screwed up. I did not click to confirm, to finalize it in my KOA app. So what do we do now? After a brief session of I cannot believe I did that, I looked at the time and realized that it was an hour earlier in Nevada. So I asked Christy if she was good driving another 3.5 hours. I was doing the driving, but if she was copacetic with that, and she said, as long as you feel strong enough. And since I was wide awake, I was feeling great, I gave a quick call to our next stop and asked them if we could come a day earlier. And they said that they had availability and we could then make that happen. So we caught them right before they were leaving for the day. But total disclaimer here, I do not recommend driving as long as we did on Saturday for safety purposes. But I knew I was feeling good. I was wide awake. We had the tunes going. We had great conversation happening. We were both wide awake and feeling great, feeling strong. So We had the time on our side. We were in no hurry. The change of time zones were on our side. We already crossed 2 time zones from the time we left Amarillo to the time we got into Nevada. So our total drive time, okay, drum roll please, 1,190 miles, which equated to 15 hours of travel time. Again, I don't always recommend that, but we continued our travel on Route 40 west until jumping on US 93 north toward Boulder City. The only downside, it was dark, and we missed the amazing views from Flagstaff to Boulder City, Nevada at Lake Mead, because I don't normally drive in the dark. But we still had some cool views with the sun setting behind the mountains like this one. So we traveled that 196 miles in 3 hours and stopped at a pilot for fuel in Arizona right before the border, and we took on 53.8 gallons of diesel. It was the highest cost yet at $5.70, 20 cents higher than our estimate of $5.50. But total cost of that stop was $303.27 before our TSD discount. Gas getting more expensive as we move further west. We then traversed another 33 miles or 30 minutes to get to the Lake Mead RV Resort, where we arrived at about 8:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Now, fortunately, there was a guide who was still there till 9 p.m. because it was very dark. He guided us to our spot in his little golf cart. We just followed him. And I knew we were on the lake because I made the reservation, but I could not see a darn thing as it was completely pitch black. I looked out and saw the moon shining bright over Lake Mead, but I couldn't see anything else. And it was just an immense amount of beautiful stars, and the light from the moon on the water of Lake Mead was just incredible. But I couldn't see really anything else in the surrounding area. So we got a good night's sleep, and we woke up to this beautiful sight. Check out the Lake Mead RV Resort. So, here's the thing. My mistake worked out well. Remember, it's not always how bad you mess up. And boy, did I mess up not confirming that reservation for Arizona. But it's how well you recover. And we recovered on the fly. And as I always tell my kids, you make mistakes, own them, learn from them, and use them to make you better, not bitter. We ended up better off getting an extra day in this beautiful site. And the mistake turned out to be a blessing. So, now, tomorrow, we head on into Las Vegas, where we will be staying at the beautiful Oasis RV Resort. We actually stayed there last May for another conference we attended. This is the biggest conference for Qredible in the industry. It starts on Wednesday. It's the MJ BizCon conference, and it's basically the Super Bowl of conferences for CBD, hemp, and legalized cannabis. Some of our key team members will be there. We'll be working there at the conference and meeting with customers and prospective customers and partners. Attending the conference will be Rick McDonald, our president and COO, Michael Boone, our VP of compliance, Doug Roberts, who runs our customer success group, our chief information officer, Ronaldo Montman, will be there, and Brendan Kenny, who is our head of user experience, and they will all be here with me working this conference. So it's going to be a busy week. We will be filming some coverage from the event, and we'll give you a first-hand look at the Qredible booth and enable you to meet some of our incredible team members who have been working really hard to get this Qredible platform to market and to bring on lots of customers that we are in the process of onboarding. So in the meantime, we shove off tomorrow around midday as we head off to Vegas, where the incredible adventures of Clark continues, as we'll join you next from the Oasis RV Resort in beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada.